Hi guys, welcome back to the channel. I'm Lisa, and today I want to share a video with you that was sent to me by a subscriber, Jessica Elm. The name of the video is 5 Myths That Employers Commonly Believe About Reasonable Accommodation, and was made by Kyle Ingram, an employment attorney who specializes in federal disability discrimination cases. The original video is about an hour long, and definitely worth a watch if your discrimination was on the basis of disability. I'll put a link in the description. And while you're over there, you may want to go ahead and subscribe. Even if your discrimination wasn't on the basis of disability, you may want to hang around till the end of this video. I'm going to share some fun little stories. Fun in a twisted kind of EEOC way, that is. But mostly today, I just want to summarize very briefly what the 5 myths are and illustrate them with some snapshots from my experience. Maybe that'll help you recognize when you're dealing with them. So now let's get straight into the myths. Myth 1. Accommodations aren't needed unless an employee is facing an adverse action. Employers who believe this are missing the whole point of reasonable accommodation, which is to level the playing field so that disabled workers have the same chance of competing in the workplace as everybody else. Equal employment opportunity. And the law says employers have to accommodate employees who are qualified, need reasonable accommodations, and request them, unless they can show that accommodating us would be an undue hardship. There are some types of discrimination that require us to show that there was an adverse impact, but failure to accommodate is not one of those. For a failure to accommodate claim, like mine, I didn't even have to prove that NASA had discriminatory intent to win. EEOC said that I proved it anyway, and they found that NASA acted in bad faith because of it. It hurt their credibility, which did affect their chances at appeal. And according to the video on the 5 myths, it probably bumped my award too. But I didn't have to prove it just to win my case. For failure to accommodate, what we do have to prove is that we should have been reasonably accommodated, and we weren't. Myth 2. I'm not discriminating because I'm treating everybody the same. In the very beginning, my boss told me that she couldn't reasonably accommodate me because that wouldn't be fair to her non-disabled employees. Like a lot of employers, she believed that giving me reasonable accommodation was giving me special treatment. But reasonable accommodation isn't special treatment. The whole point of reasonable accommodation is to put us disabled workers on the same footing as non-disabled workers. So reasonable accommodation is only fair. Myth 3. If I provide some accommodation, that's all I need to do. NASA love these kinds of games, and they are crazy making. I worried a little about being able to prove my case for failure to accommodate, because NASA did have a form signed by my boss that said they were reasonably accommodating me. But in reality, they only gave me part of the accommodations I was requesting, and the part they gave me wasn't particularly effective. The law says that employers have to provide effective, reasonable accommodations, and mine weren't. So if your employer is hiding behind that same kind of half-ass compliance, the best thing you can do for yourself is to let them know in writing that your accommodations aren't effective, and remind them of that at strategic points along the way. I did, and it turned out to be a really good move. All those emails ended up being my proof that NASA never actually provided me with effective, reasonable accommodations. Myth 4. I only need to accommodate the essential functions of the job. I requested telework as reasonable accommodation on days when I had certain specific symptoms of my disability, symptoms that were very hard to manage in a professional office setting. But my boss only allowed me to telework when she urgently needed me to perform an essential function of my job. Every time I requested telework, my boss asked me for a list of tasks that I planned to do that day and how long I planned to spend on each one. And I gave her that. But if I told her that a task would take 4 hours, she'd approve me to telework for 2 of those hours. And if I told her that I planned to spend any time at all answering emails or returning phone calls, she'd zero out the hours and tell me those could wait until I got back to the office. And the end result was that she would usually approve a couple of hours of telework when I asked, and she'd tell me that I had to take sick leave for the rest of the time. That nitpicking drew the judge's attention at my hearing, and he had some questions.
Were there ever any days when she was in the office and didn't have any urgent, essential engineering tasks to do?
Of course.
And what did she do on those days?
I don't know what you mean.
I mean, were there tasks that weren't urgent or essential in and of themselves that she was still expected to do when she was in the office, like answering emails or making phone calls?
Well, sure.
And how did you take those sorts of things into consideration when you were figuring her telework hours?
I didn't. NASA shouldn't have to pay for the hours that she spent doing busy work from home. Those things could wait till she got back to the office.
So when she got back to the office, did NASA pay her for the hours she spent doing email and answering phone calls then?
Myth 5. I can take my time about providing reasonable accommodations. EEOC found that NASA delayed acting on my request for reasonable accommodation far too long. It took 75 days just to get that worthless piece of paper that I keep talking about. And even after waiting that long, several of the accommodations that I requested were never provided. NASA was full of excuses about why it took them so long. The judge cut through all those excuses with 2 questions. Would it have been an undue hardship for you to go ahead and grant her telework as a reasonable accommodation while you were processing her request? And my boss's answer was sticky sweet. Oh no, that wouldn't have been hard at all. She was already approved to telework. All I had to do was allow it. Then why did you take 75 days to allow it? Great question. I had some kind of an issue with every one of the 5 myths that Kyle Ingram talked about in his video. Only when I was going through it, I didn't know about these myths. So I spent a lot of time wondering, WTF? In retrospect, these 5 myths explained a lot for me. I didn't recognize them when I was actually going through the process. Luckily for me, my EEOC judge did recognize them and took the time to call them out. Your judge may or may not be willing to do that. So just in case, it's worth learning to recognize and call out the 5 myths for yourself. You guys take care and hang in. Fight smart and hang in.